The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a vast ocean of seats and platforms. Thousands of different alien species filled the chamber, their voices creating a low hum that echoed off the metal walls. Some beings floated in special tanks filled with glowing liquid. Others perched on high branches that grew from the floor. A few creatures that looked like walking crystals stood perfectly still near the center. Ambassador Zethkar walked slowly toward the speaking platform. His 6 legs moved with careful precision across the smooth floor. Each of his 6 eyes scanned the crowd, looking for signs of fear or respect. The Varaxian Empire had sent their most experienced diplomat to make this announcement. Zethkar had conquered 17 different worlds in his lifetime. His dark green armor bore the marks of countless battles. Behind him, 3 other Varaxians followed in formation. Their massive bodies cast long shadows across the chamber floor. Each warrior carried weapons that could slice through steel like paper. Their presence was meant to send a clear message to everyone watching. Captain Jake Sullivan sat in the human observation section, far from the main floor. His uniform was simple compared to the fancy clothes worn by other species. The small human delegation looked tiny next to the massive alien representatives around them. Jake had served in 3 different wars before becoming a diplomat. His weathered face showed the marks of someone who had seen too much combat. Dr. Lisa Martinez sat next to him, taking notes on her small computer tablet. She had studied alien biology for 20 years. Her job was to help humans understand how other species thought and acted. She knew that today's meeting would be important for the future of human space. Zethkar reached the speaking platform and turned to face the assembled crowd. His voice boomed through the chamber without any need for amplification. Members of the Galactic Council, he began, his words sharp and clear. The Varaxian Empire comes before you today to announce our next phase of expansion. We have identified 47 star systems currently occupied by the species known as humans. These systems contain valuable resources that our empire requires. A murmur ran through the crowd. Many species had heard rumors about the Varaxians planning something big. Now they knew what it was. The humans have controlled these systems for only 300 of their years, Zethkar continued. They are a young species with limited military capability. Their technology is primitive compared to our own. We do not expect significant resistance to our expansion. In the ancient section of the chamber, a tall crystalline being began to glow with soft blue light. Elder Counselor Thymoth had lived for over 2,000 years. She had seen many wars and the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations. Her species, the Kepler Coalition, were among the oldest in the galaxy. Thymoth rose slowly from her position. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries. Ambassador Zethkar, she said, her words ringing through the chamber. You speak of matters that you do not fully understand. The humans are not like other species you have conquered. They are dangerous in ways that cannot be measured by simple military strength. Zethkar's mandibles clicked together in what humans would recognize as laughter. Dangerous, Elder Counselor? With respect, the humans have no natural weapons. They have no armor plating like my people. They cannot breathe poison gas or survive in the vacuum of space. They die easily and their lifespans are short. What possible threat could they represent? That is exactly why they are so dangerous, Thymoth replied. Her crystalline body pulsed with brighter light as she spoke. What they lack in natural gifts, they make up for with something far more terrifying. They adapt to any situation. They refuse to give up, even when defeat seems certain. They learn from every battle and become stronger. Other beings in the chamber began to shift uncomfortably. Some had heard stories about human conflicts. The tales were often dismissed as exaggerations or myths. The universe has tried to warn your people, Thymoth continued. The Hegemony Wars should have taught everyone about human determination. When the Silicon Uprising threatened to destroy all organic life, it was humans who found a way to stop the machines. During the Void Breach incident, when reality itself began to tear apart, human scientists sacrificed themselves to seal the damage. Zethkar waved one of his clawed hands dismissively. Stories told to frighten children, Elder Counselor. The Varaxian Empire has conquered 43 different species across 2,000 worlds. We have never met a foe we could not defeat. These humans will simply be the 44th species to join our empire. Captain Sullivan finally stood up in the observation section. His movement was slow and deliberate. Every eye in the chamber turned toward the small human delegation. Ambassador Zethkar, Sullivan said, his voice calm and steady. I speak for the United Human Federation. We have no desire for war with your people. Our colonies are peaceful. Our people want only to live their lives and raise their families in safety. Your desires are not important, human, Zethkar replied with obvious contempt. Varaxian expansion will proceed as planned. You may surrender your worlds now and avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Or you may resist and face the consequences. Dr. Martinez looked up from her tablet. She had been recording everything for later analysis. Her studies of Varaxian culture told her that they respected only strength. Diplomatic words would mean nothing to them. Captain, she whispered to Sullivan, their body language indicates complete confidence. They genuinely believe we pose no threat. Sullivan nodded slightly. He had expected this outcome. The Varaxians were known throughout the galaxy for their arrogance. They had never lost a major war. Every species they encountered either surrendered quickly or was crushed by superior force. Ambassador Zethkar, Sullivan said, raising his voice so everyone could hear, I must formally request that you reconsider this course of action. Human space is protected under Treaty 445A of the Colonial Protection Accords. Any unprovoked attack on our colonies would be considered an act of war. Treaties are for equals, Zethkar snarled. You will learn your place in the galaxy soon enough. The Varaxian delegation turned and began walking toward the exit. Their heavy footsteps echoed through the now silent chamber. Most of the other species watched them go without comment. A few beings exchanged worried glances. As the chamber began to empty, Dr. Martinez turned to Captain Sullivan. Longdew, you think the Varaxians will wait before they attack? Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. He had seen this pattern before during his military career. Aggressive species always made the same mistake. They looked at humans and saw weakness where they should have seen restraint. Not long, he finally answered. Maybe a few months. They'll want to strike fast before we can prepare our defenses. What? How long do you think they'll last once they start this war? Sullivan's expression grew grim. His hands clenched into fists as he thought about the peaceful colonies that would soon be under attack. Men and women who had never hurt anyone would die because of Varaxian arrogance. Longer than they should, he said quietly. But not nearly as long as they think they will. I just hope some of them survive long enough to learn from this mistake. Elder Counselor Thymoth approached the human delegation as they prepared to leave. Her crystalline form cast rainbow patterns on the nearby walls. Captain Sullivan, she said, her ancient voice filled with sadness. I tried to warn them. My people have seen what happens when humanity is pushed too far. The Varaxians do not understand what they are about to unleash. Thank you for trying, Elder Counselor, Sullivan replied. But I think we both know that. Some species only learn through experience. The universe tried to warn them. Now they'll discover why that warning existed. The three beings stood together in the empty chamber, each understanding that they had just witnessed the beginning of something that would change the galaxy forever. The Varaxians had made their choice. Soon, they would learn why the universe had tried to warn them about humanity. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council meeting. The mining colony of New Oregon continued its peaceful existence at the edge of human space. The small settlement was home to 800 people who had come to extract valuable minerals. From the rocky planet below, Colonial Administrator Ben Carter sat in his office reviewing the monthly production reports. The numbers looked good. The miners had exceeded their quotas for the 3rd month in a row. Families were happy, children were healthy, and life was quiet on the frontier. The morning sun cast long shadows across the settlement as people began their daily routines. Children walked to school, carrying their books and lunchboxes. Adults headed to the mining facilities to begin another day of work. The community center was preparing for the weekly town meeting where everyone would discuss local issues. Dr. Susan Phillips finished her morning rounds at the small medical facility. As the colony's only doctor, she knew every person in the settlement by name. Most of her work involved treating minor injuries and helping deliver babies. It was a peaceful job that she loved. In the communications center, Officer Amy Walsh monitored the standard frequencies. Her job was to maintain contact with other human colonies and watch for incoming ships. Most days, nothing interesting happened. Merchant vessels would occasionally stop to trade supplies, but major traffic was rare in this remote system. Chief Mining Engineer Carlos Rodriguez was inspecting the main excavation site when the proximity alarms began screaming across the settlement. The loud sirens had never been used before except during monthly tests. Carlos dropped his tools and ran. Toward the communications center, Amy Walsh's fingers flew across her control panel as she tried to identify the source of the alarm. Her screen showed massive energy signatures dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The ships were huge, much larger than any merchant vessel she had ever seen. "Ben, you need to get down here right now," she called over the intercom. "We have unknown ships approaching the colony. Multiple vessels, heavy configuration." Administrator Carter ran to the communications center, still carrying his production reports. When he saw the display screens, his face went pale. 27 enormous ships were moving toward New Oregon. Their design was unlike anything in the human databases. "Amy, try to contact them," Carter ordered. "Standard greeting protocols. Find out what they want." Amy transmitted the universal peace signal, followed by a standard welcome message. "Unknown vessels. This is New Oregon Colony. Please identify yourselves and state your purpose. We welcome peaceful contact with all species." The response came 30 minutes later. The alien voice was harsh and filled with contempt. "Primitive. Humans, you will surrender your world immediately. Resistance is futile. Submit to the authority of the Varaxian Empire." Carter stared at the communication display. He had heard about the Varaxians from the news reports after the council meeting. Everyone knew they had threatened human space, but most people hoped diplomacy would prevent actual conflict. "This is Administrator Carter of New Oregon Colony," he replied. "Unknown vessels. You are in violation of Colonial Protection Treaty 445A. This system is under the protection of the United Human Federation. Please withdraw immediately or face defensive action." The alien laughter that came through the speakers sent chills down everyone's spine. Defensive action? From minors? "You amuse us, human. Pray to witness the power of the Varaxian Empire." Commander Verkanish stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conquest of Inferiors. He had commanded 17 successful conquest campaigns for the Varaxian Empire. Every species he had encountered followed the same pattern: initial resistance, then fear, then surrender. Humans would be no different. "Target their largest structures," he ordered his weapons officer. "Show them what happens to those who defy the Empire. Begin orbital bombardment." The attack began at exactly 10:47 local time. Massive energy beams struck the colony from orbit, turning buildings into vapor and melting metal into slag. The school was hit first, then the community center, then the main residential areas. Ben Carter grabbed the emergency communication device as the building shook around him. "All residents proceed to emergency shelters immediately," he broadcast. "This is not a drill. Seek shelter in the reinforced bunkers." Dr. Phillips was helping evacuate patients from the medical center when the first blast wave hit. The building collapsed around her, trapping her under heavy debris. She could hear children crying somewhere in the darkness. Her medical training took over as she began crawling toward the sounds. Carlos Rodriguez led a group of miners toward the underground shelters. The reinforced bunkers had been built to protect against cave-ins and equipment failures. No one had ever imagined they would be needed to survive an alien attack. The bombardment continued for 17 minutes. When it finally stopped, most of New Oregon was gone. The neat rows of houses had been replaced by smoking craters. The school where children had been learning about history and science was now a pile of twisted metal and ash. Amy Walsh pulled herself from the wreckage of the communications center. Her equipment was destroyed, but she still had a portable emergency beacon. Her hands shook as she tried to activate the device. Blood ran down her face from a cut on her forehead. "This is New Oregon Colony to any human vessel," she transmitted. Into the void. We are under attack by unknown alien forces. Repeat, we are under attack. Multiple casualties. Settlement destroyed. Commander Vrokanash watched the destruction through his ship's sensors. The bombardment had been efficient and thorough. Now came the standard procedure of cataloging resources and establishing administrative control. Send down the survey teams, he ordered. Catalog all valuable materials and identify suitable locations for Vracian facilities. Eliminate any remaining human presence. The landing craft descended through the smoke and dust. Vraxian soldiers emerged wearing full combat armor and carrying heavy weapons, expected to find cowering survivors begging for mercy. Instead, they found something else entirely. Dr. Phillips had managed to free herself from the debris. Her other survivors were emerging from the underground shelters and reinforced basements. 47 people had survived the initial attack. They were injured, traumatized, and filled with grief for their lost friends and family, but they were also angry. Everyone stay together, Dr. Phillips called out. Help the wounded. Need to find the emergency supplies and establish a defensive perimeter. The Varaxian soldiers found the human survivors gathered around the ruins of the medical center. Instead of surrendering, the humans were treating their wounded and organizing themselves into some kind of resistance group. Surrender immediately, the lead Varaxian warrior commanded. You will be processed for relocation to labor facilities. Dr. Phillips stepped forward, still covered in dust and blood from digging through the rubble. We demand to know why you attacked our colony. We are civilians. We have no military installations here. You resisted the authority of the Varaxian Empire, the warrior replied. Resistance results in punishment. You will comply or face elimination. We are doctors, teachers, miners, and farmers, Dr. Phillips said, her voice growing stronger. Never threatened anyone. You murdered our children without warning. You destroyed our homes without provocation. The Varaxian warrior raised his weapon. Your complaints are irrelevant. Submit or die. That was when Amy Walsh's emergency transmission finally reached the nearest human patrol ship. Captain Danny Morrison of the UES Frontier Guard received the message while conducting routine border patrol duties. The words that came through his speakers changed everything. This is New Oregon colony to any human vessel. We are under attack by Vraxian forces. It's a population of New Oregon. Population reduced to 47 survivors. They came without warning. They came without provocation. Amy's voice broke as she continued the transmission. They killed our children first. School was their primary target. 12 people are dead. Send help, please. Somebody send help. Captain Morrison immediately changed course toward New Oregon. As his ship's faster-than-light engines engaged, he transmitted the message to Colonial Defense Command. Within hours, every human military commander in the sector would know what had happened. The message would reach the news networks within 24 hours. At 48 hours, every human world would know about the massacre at New Oregon. Images of destroyed homes and murdered children would be broadcast across human space. Back on the planet's surface, Dr. Phillips knelt beside the body of 8-year-old Katie Chin, one of her young patients. The little girl had been walking to school when the attack began. She had been carrying a drawing she had made for her mother. You will remember you, Dr. Phillips whispered. All of you. Someone will answer for what happened here. The Varaxian commander considered the human survivors to be a minor administrative problem. A few dozen primitives hiding in the ruins of their settlement posed no threat to the mighty Varaxian Empire. They would be dealt with quickly and efficiently. He had no way of knowing that. Those 47 survivors would become the spark that ignited the greatest war in galactic history. The Varaxians had drawn first blood against humanity. They had deliberately targeted civilians and murdered children. The emergency session of the Earth's Security Council began at midnight. President Laura Thompson had been awakened by her security chief 3 hours earlier with news that would change everything. She sat at the head of the long table in the secure conference room, her face showing the strain of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. Around the table sat the most powerful people in human space. Defense Secretary Richard Hayes had flown in from Luna Base. Secretary of State Helen Davis had canceled her diplomatic mission to attend. General Patricia Clark arrived, still wearing her combat uniform from training exercises. The large wall display showed the final casualty reports from New Oregon. 312 confirmed dead. The names scrolled slowly down the screen, each one representing a life cut short by alien aggression. President Thompson read every name as they appeared. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carefully controlled. "We are here because the Varaxian Empire has committed an act of war against the United Human Federation. They have murdered our citizens without provocation. They have targeted civilians, including children." Defense Secretary Hayes opened his folder and spread out the intelligence reports. "Madam President, our analysis indicates this was a deliberate terror attack. The Varaxians targeted the school first, then residential areas. They wanted to maximize civilian casualties." "How many children?" President Thompson asked quietly. 43 confirmed dead under the age of 16, Hayes replied. The youngest victim was 5 years old. Her name was Emma Rodriguez. Was walking to school when the attack began. The room fell silent. Several council members stared at the table, unable to look at the casualty reports. General Clark's hands clenched into fists as she listened to the details. Secretary of State Davis spoke first. "Madam President, the Galactic Council has offered to mediate this situation. They claim this was a cultural misunderstanding that can be resolved through diplomatic channels." President Thompson's voice became dangerously quiet. "Cultural misunderstanding? Helen, they deliberately chose to murder children as their opening move. The sensor logs show they specifically targeted the school building. There is no misunderstanding here." Admiral Kevin Brooks appeared on the conference room's holographic display. He was calling in from the fleet staging area at Titan Station, where ships had been gathering for months in preparation for possible conflict. "Admiral Brooks," President Thompson said, "what is the current status of our military forces?" "Madam President, I have been preparing for this possibility since the council meeting 3 months ago. The first and third fleets are ready for immediate deployment. We can have 416 vessels moving toward Varaxian space within 72 hours. "What kind of ships, Admiral?" "Full battle configuration, ma'am. 12 dreadnoughts, 47 heavy cruisers, 132 destroyers, and support vessels. The flagship UES Defiance is equipped with our latest weapon systems." General Clark leaned forward. "Madam President, the Colonial Marine Corps has 20,000 troops ready for deployment. The Rapid Response Division is already loading equipment onto transport ships." Dr. Eric Shaw, the President's science advisor, raised his hand nervously. "Madam President, before we commit to military action, perhaps we should consider the scale of what we're discussing. The Varaxian Empire controls over 2,000 worlds. They have conquered 43 different species. Are we certain we can win a war against such a powerful enemy?" President Thompson stood up and walked to the large window that looked out over the lights of Washington. The city below was peaceful, unaware that their government was making decisions that would affect the entire galaxy. "Shaw," she said, without turning around. "Let me explain something about humanity that the galaxy seems to have forgotten. We don't start wars. We prefer peace, diplomacy, and cooperation. But when someone else starts a war with us, we finish it." She turned back to face the council. "When they kill our children, when they target our civilians, when they commit murder in the name of conquest, we don't just fight back, make sure it never happens again." The president walked back to her chair and pressed the red authorization button on her personal control panel. "Admiral Brooks, you are hereby authorized to use any and all necessary force to neutralize the Varaxian threat to human space. Rules of engagement are unrestricted warfare." "Understood, Madam President." "Don't." "Are your orders regarding Varaxian civilian populations?" "Protect them whenever possible, Admiral. We are not them. Do not target innocents. But their military assets are to be considered hostile and eliminated. Make sure every species in the galaxy gets a very clear message about what happens when you attack human families." Within 6 hours, the largest human fleet in history was moving through space toward Varaxian territory. Word of the fleet movement spread quickly through human space. Colonists on remote worlds watched as military ships passed overhead, Heading toward war. Captain Pete Williams commanded the destroyer U.S. Vengeful. His ship had been patrolling the outer colonies when the recall order came. Like every other human captain, he had seen the reports from New Oregon. The images of destroyed homes and dead children were burned into his memory. "Captain," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a message from Admiral Brooks. All ships are to maintain communications silence until we reach the target." System Williams nodded. The fleet was using a strategy that had never been attempted before. Instead of announcing their intentions, they would strike without warning, just as the Varaxians had done at New Oregon. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Admiral Brooks studied the tactical displays. Intelligence reports indicated that the Varaxian home system was defended by over 800 warships. It would be the largest space battle in galactic history, Admiral, his intelligence officer, reported. "We're detecting increased Varaxian fleet movements. They appear to be consolidating their forces around their most important worlds." "They know we're coming," Brooks replied. "Good, I want them to have time to think about what they've done." Lieutenant Commander Jane Murphy, the fleet's tactical officer, approached the Admiral with new reports. "Hey, sir, we're receiving messages from human colonies throughout the sector. Volunteer ships are asking permission to join the fleet." Brooks smiled grimly. "Many volunteers?" "Over 300 civilian vessels, sir. Cargo ships, passenger liners, even private yachts. They all want to help. Thank them for their courage, but this is a military operation. Have them stand by to provide support for refugee operations if needed." News of the fleet movement had reached other species throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Council was in emergency session, trying to prevent what many saw as an inevitable disaster. Elder Counselor Thymeth spoke to the assembled delegates about the coming storm. "The humans are not seeking conquest," she warned. "They are seeking justice. The Varaxians have awakened something that should have been left alone. Yes. When this war ends, the balance of power in the galaxy will be forever changed." On Earth, President Thompson addressed the human population in a special broadcast. People throughout human space stopped what they were doing to listen to their leader's words. "My fellow humans," she began, "3 days ago, the Varaxian Empire committed an act of pure evil against our people. They murdered innocent civilians, including children, in an unprovoked attack on New Oregon colony." The president's voice grew stronger as she continued. "For 300 years, we have explored the galaxy in peace. We have offered friendship to every species we have encountered. We have shared our knowledge and our resources. We've asked for nothing except the right to live in peace. The Varaxians have taken that peace from us. They have spilled innocent blood in the name of conquest. They have chosen to make war against families, against children, against everything we hold dear. Today, our fleet moves toward Varaxian space. We do not go as conquerors, we go as protectors. We go to ensure that no other colony will suffer as New Oregon has suffered. We go to show the galaxy that there are still those who will stand against evil." The broadcast ended with images of the New Oregon Memorial Service. 47 survivors had gathered to honor their dead friends and family members. Dr. Susan Phillips spoke for all of them when she placed flowers on the mass grave. "We'll not forget," she promised, "and we will not let their deaths be meaningless." As the human fleet approached Varaxian space, Commander Vrakanash received urgent orders to return to the home system. His conquest of New Oregon had been considered a complete success by Varaxian High Command, and the humans had been eliminated with minimal losses. Now intelligence reports spoke of a massive human fleet approaching their most important worlds. Vrakanash dismissed the reports as impossible. The humans were a primitive species with limited military capability. How could they possibly threaten the mighty Varaxian Empire? He would learn the answer to that question very soon. The Battle of Varaxian Prime began when the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Admiral Brooks stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching as his sensors detected the massive enemy fleet waiting for them. 800 Varaxian warships hung in space around their home planet like angry hornets defending their nest. "Sir, we're being hailed by the Varaxian High Command," reported Communications Officer Lieutenant Danny Foster. His voice was steady, despite the enormous fleet arrayed against them. "Put them through, Lieutenant." The main screen flickered to life, showing Supreme Commander Zethkar in his battle armor. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship buzzed with activity as Varaxian officers prepared for what they expected to be an easy victory. Human Admiral Zethkar spoke with obvious contempt. "You face the combined might of the Varaxian Imperial Navy. 800 ships stand between you and our home world. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift." Admiral Brooks smiled coldly. "Commander Zethkar, I'm going to give you one chance to surrender unconditionally. Your forces attacked and murdered innocent civilians at New Oregon Colony. 312 people died because of your orders. Now you get to see what happens when you wake up a sleeping giant." Zethkar's mandibles clicked, and what humans had learned was Varaxian laughter. "You were outnumbered 2-1, human. Fool. Your primitive ships will be destroyed in minutes." "Math was never your species' strong suit, was it?" Brooks replied calmly. He gestured to his tactical officer. "Lieutenant Commander Jane Murphy, show the Varaxians what they're really facing." Murphy's fingers danced across her control panel. The tactical display lit up as every human vessel in the system revealed its true position. What the Varaxians had detected as 400 ships was actually a carefully planned battle formation. Smaller vessels had been hidden behind larger ones, creating false sensor readings. 1,237 ships, Commander Brooks announced. 18 dreadnoughts, 62 heavy cruisers, and something special we've been saving for an occasion like this. The massive shape of the UES Retribution decloaked at the center of the human formation. The experimental super dreadnought was twice the size of anything previously built by humanity. Its hull bristled. With weapons that had been theoretical concepts just 6 months earlier, Commander Zethkar's confidence visibly cracked. "This is impossible. Our intelligence reports indicated that humans possessed only limited military capability." Captain Tony Garcia's voice came from the Retribution's bridge. "Your intelligence reports were fed exactly what we wanted them to contain. Did you really think we would leave our colonies defenseless without having something held in reserve?" The revelation that humanity had been deliberately hiding its true military strength sent shockwaves through the Varaxian fleet. Many ship commanders began requesting new orders from their superiors. Some suggested retreat, but Varaxian honor demanded they fight. Al-Ship Zethkar broadcast to his fleet, "Attack Formation Delta. Show these humans the price of challenging the Varaxian Empire." The battle began when the first Varaxian ship opened fire. Massive energy beams lanced across space toward the human fleet. But instead of the chaotic battle the Varaxians expected, they found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. Human ships moved with perfect coordination. Each vessel knew exactly where every other ship would be at any given moment. Fighter squadrons launched from carriers in precise formations. Destroyers moved to protect larger ships, while cruisers concentrated fire on specific targets. Captain Pete Williams commanded his destroyer with the skill of someone who had trained for this moment his entire career. "All batteries, target the lead Varaxian cruiser. Coordinate with the UES Hammer and UES Vengeance for maximum effect." 3 human destroyers fired simultaneously at the same enemy ship. The concentrated barrage overwhelmed the Varaxian vessel's shields and tore through its armor plating. The enemy cruiser exploded in a ball of superheated plasma. The Varaxians fought bravely, but they fought as individuals.
Ow!
Each captain sought personal glory and honor in single combat. Against human-packed tactics and superior coordination, individual heroism proved insufficient. Dr. Maria Santos watched the battle unfold from her position on the UES Defiance's science station. As a xenobiology specialist, she had been assigned to study Varaxian combat behavior during the engagement. "Admiral," she reported, "I'm detecting massive confusion in the Varaxian fleet communications. They're not used to fighting an enemy that coordinates this effectively." "Maintain pressure on all fronts," Brooks ordered. "Full advance. Show them what human military doctrine looks like when we're serious about winning." The human fleet pressed forward in waves. The first wave consisted of fast destroyers and cruisers that broke through Varaxian defensive lines. The second wave brought heavy battleships that engaged the main enemy fleet. The third wave included the super dreadnoughts that targeted the most powerful Varaxian vessels. Commander Verkanish. The Varaxian officer who had led the attack on New Oregon found his ship surrounded by 3 human cruisers. His bridge crew looked to him for orders, but he had no experience fighting an enemy this organized. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, "our shields are failing. Love breaches on decks 4 through 7. We need to retreat." "Reconsian warriors do not retreat," Verkanish snarled. But even as he spoke, he could see that his fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy they had underestimated by hour 18 of the battle. The Varaxian fleet was in full retreat. Ships that could still move tried to escape toward the outer system. Those too damaged to flee sent surrender signals to the approaching human forces, Captain. Sarah Mitchell of the cruiser U.S. Justice received one of the surrender signals. "This is the Varaxian vessel Pain of enemies requesting mercy. We have wounded aboard and no longer have functioning weapons." Mitchell followed her orders regarding enemy survivors. "Varaxian vessel, heave to and prepare to be boarded. Teams will treat your wounded. Will be treated according to the laws of war." The Varaxian captain was confused by this response. In their culture, surrender meant death or slavery. The concept of treating defeated enemies with mercy was foreign. To them, by day 3 of the battle, Admiral Brooks had achieved complete control of Varaxian Prime's orbital space. The planet's defensive stations had been neutralized. The mighty Varaxian Imperial Navy had been reduced to scattered remnants fleeing toward distant systems. Admiral Lieutenant Commander Murphy reported, "We're receiving communication from the planetary surface. The Varaxian government wishes to discuss terms." "Tell them we'll discuss terms after our ground forces have secured all military installations," Brooks replied. General Clark's Marines are ready to deploy. Landing operation began on day 4. General Patricia Clark led 20,000 colonial Marines onto the surface of Varaxian Prime. Their mission was to secure military bases and protect civilian populations from any acts of revenge or desperation. Sergeant Mike Davis of the 3rd Marine Battalion found himself guarding a Varaxian civilian hospital. His orders were clear: protect non-combatants and prevent any harm to innocent aliens. "Sarge," one of his Marines asked, "why are we protecting them? They killed our people at New Oregon." Davis looked at the frightened Varaxian civilians hiding. Inside the hospital, many were children who had never seen humans before. "Because that's who we are, Marine. We don't make war on kids and doctors. We're better than that." The war that the Varaxians had expected to last for months was over in less than a week. Supreme Commander Zethkar sat in his ruined command center, staring at reports of total defeat. His mighty empire had been crushed by an enemy he had dismissed as primitive and weak. A human Marine captain entered the command center under a flag of truce. "Commander Zethkar, I'm Captain Robert Lee of the Colonial Marines. I'm here to discuss your surrender." "You have one," Zethkar admitted. "The Varaxian Empire submits to human authority." "What are your terms?" Captain Lee looked at the defeated alien commander with a mixture of pity and contempt. "Our terms are simple: complete withdrawal from all human space, full reparations for New Oregon colony, and a guarantee that nothing like this will ever happen again. What happens to my people, they'll be treated fairly and with respect. We're not conquerors, Commander. We're protectors, the universe. Tried to warn you about that difference. Maybe next time someone will listen." As news of the victory spread throughout human space, crowds gathered in city centers to celebrate. But Admiral Brooks felt no joy as he watched the defeated Varaxian fleet limping away from their home system. The price of this victory had been paid by the innocent dead of New Oregon colony. The sleeping giant was awake now. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the Battle of Varaxian Prime, the Galactic Council prepared for its most important session in 300 years. Representatives from every known spacefaring species filled the Great Chamber. News of humanity's decisive victory had spread throughout the galaxy, changing how every civilization viewed the small bipedal species. President Laura Thompson arrived at the council station aboard the flagship U.S. Defiance. This was the first time a human leader had personally attended a council session since the species joined the galactic community. Her presence sent a clear message that humanity was no longer content to observe from the sidelines. Elder Counselor Thymoth watched the human delegation enter the chamber. President Thompson walked with quiet confidence, followed by Admiral Brooks and several survivors from New Oregon Colony. The crystalline being had lived long enough to see many wars, but none had ended as decisively as the human-Vraxian conflict. The Vraxian delegation sat in a special section reserved for those seeking counsel mercy. Reconciliation Speaker Vethmil had replaced the disgraced Supreme Commander Zethkar. The new Vraxian leader bore visible scars from the battle and carried himself with the humility of someone who had learned a terrible lesson. Honored delegates. Elder Counselor Thymoth began. We gathered today to address the conclusion of the human-Vraxian conflict and to establish new protocols for preventing similar tragedies in the future. Speaker Vethmil rose first, his voice shaking with emotion. Honored Council, the Vraxian people acknowledge our grave error. We attacked innocent humans without provocation. We murdered civilians, including children. We underestimated not just human military capability, but human moral conviction. He turned toward the human delegation. We offer full reparations to the families of New Oregon Colony. We seek guidance on how to make amends for our actions. The Vraxian Empire formally requests forgiveness and asks for instruction on how to avoid such mistakes in the future. President Thompson stood to address the assembly. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had made difficult decisions and lived with their consequences. Honored delegates, the United Human Federation accepts the Vraxian surrender and their offer of reparations. However, we are not here today merely to accept an apology. She gestured toward Dr. Susan Phillips, who had requested permission to speak for the New Oregon survivors. Dr. Phillips represents those who suffered most from Vraxian aggression. I believe the council should hear her words. Dr. Phillips approached the speaker's platform. Her hand still bore scars from digging through the rubble of her destroyed colony. When she spoke, her voice carried the pain of someone who had held dying children in her arms. Honored delegates, I speak not as a politician or a military officer, but as someone who lived through the massacre at New Oregon Colony. I watched children die because one species decided that human lives were expendable. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the most warlike species present seemed uncomfortable with her words. The universe warned the Vraxians not to provoke humanity. That warning was not about our weapons or our ships. It was about what we become when you threaten our families. When you force us to choose between peace and protecting those we love, we will always choose protection. She turned to address the Vraxian delegation directly. Your people have learned this lesson at great cost. 700 Vraxian worlds. Now understand what human military doctrine looks like when we are truly committed to war. But here's what might surprise you. We take no joy in your defeat. Dr. Phillips paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled alien representatives. We did not seek conquest or glory. We sought justice for the innocent dead. That justice has been achieved, but the cost was terrible for both our species. Ambassador Kevin Chen, humanity's chief diplomatic representative, stood to present the formal human position. The Human Federation proposes the establishment of the Galactic Protection Compact. Any species that deliberately targets civilians of any other species will face the combined response of all signatory worlds. The proposal sent murmurs throughout the chamber. Several aggressive species shifted uncomfortably as they realized the implications of such an agreement. Furthermore, Chen continued, humanity offers our protection to any species threatened by extinction or genocide, regardless of their technological level or political alignment. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us to coexist peacefully. Representative Clichter of the Insectoid Collective raised one of his forearms. Ambassador Chen, you speak of protection, but your species has just demonstrated the ability to destroy entire fleets. How can we be certain that humanity will not use this power? For conquest? President Thompson answered the question herself. Representative Clichter, observe our actions rather than our capabilities. After defeating the Vraxian Empire, we could have occupied their worlds and enslaved their people. Instead, we withdrew our forces and offered humanitarian aid. Our nature is to protect, not to conquer. Elder Counselor Thymoth's crystalline form shimmered with what humans had learned to recognize as approval. The wisdom of this proposal is evident. The Council will vote on the Galactic Protection Compact immediately. The vote was unanimous. Even species that had previously supported aggressive expansion policies voted in favor of the compact. The demonstration of human military power had convinced everyone that cooperation was preferable to conflict. As the formal session concluded, Speaker Vethmil approached Dr. Phillips privately. His scarred face showed genuine remorse as he spoke. To the human survivor, Dr. Phillips, I must ask you something that troubles me deeply. Why did your people show mercy to our civilians when we showed none to yours? Our children were spared when yours were murdered. Dr. Phillips looked at the former enemy with tired but kind eyes. Because that is who we are, Speaker Vethmil. When you attacked us, you expected us to become monsters like yourselves. Instead, we became exactly what we needed to be, protectors. She gestured toward the human delegation. The universe warned you about our capacity for war, but it should also have mentioned our capacity for justice. We fight only when we must, and we stop fighting when justice is achieved. 3 years later, Dr. Phillips stood before the New Oregon Memorial on the rebuilt colony. The black stone monument bore the names of all 312 victims of the Vraxian attack. Families from across human space came to visit the memorial and remember those who had died. The rebuilt colony was larger and more prosperous than before. Advanced defensive systems protected the settlement, but the people hoped they would never be needed again. Children played in parks built where houses had once stood. Their laughter was the best tribute to those who had been lost. A Vraxian ship orbited the planet, its crew working alongside human engineers to complete the memorial project. The former enemies had become unlikely partners in ensuring that such tragedies never happened. Again, Speaker Vethmil had personally supervised the construction of the memorial. His people had contributed rare metals and crystals that would preserve the monument for thousands of years. It was a small gesture, but it represented their commitment to remembering their victims. The names will never fade, he promised Dr. Phillips during the dedication ceremony. Our children will learn these names and understand the cost of aggression. The Vraxian Empire will never again make war on innocents. Captain Jake Sullivan, now promoted to Admiral, attended the ceremony representing the Galactic Council. The same man who had tried to warn the Vraxians months earlier now oversaw the peace that had emerged from their defeat. The universe tried to warn them, he said during his speech. Ancient species like the Kepler Coalition knew what would happen if humanity was pushed too far. But some lessons can only be learned through experience. He looked out at the crowd of humans and aliens who had gathered for the memorial service. Today we remember not just the victims of New Oregon, but all those who have suffered from senseless violence. The Galactic Protection Compact ensures that their sacrifice has meaning. As the ceremony ended, children from the rebuilt colony placed flowers at the base of the memorial. Among them were young Vraxians whose families had come to live on New Oregon as part of the reconciliation process. Former enemies played together in the shadow of the monument to war's victims. Dr. Phillips watched the children with tears in her eyes. They died so that no children of any species would ever again face such cruelty. She whispered to herself. The Vraxian Reconciliation Fleet maintained a permanent station in the system. Their ships had been converted from weapons of war to tools of humanitarian aid. Former Vraxian warriors now helped build hospitals and schools throughout human space and across the galaxy. When aggressive species contemplated expansion into others' territory, they remembered the lesson of Vraxian Prime. The universe had warned them about humanity. Some warnings, once ignored, are never given twice. The sleeping giant was awake now, watching over those who could not protect themselves.